Senator Campbell, you're recognized to suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute for House Bill 3703.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. This Bill 3703 is about compassion. In 2015, the legislature created the Compassionate Use Act program to prescribe cannabis oil with low 0.5% THC to patients who suffer from intractable epilepsy. Now, for patients participating in this program, they have had a remarkable and life-altering change because of this. That's compassion. Today, this bill expands access to the program to treat more patients with specifically diagnosed medical conditions, including incurable neurodegenerative diseases like multiple sclerosis, very debilitating disease, Parkinson's, we all know folks that have that, and the rare but debilitating disease, Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. The list includes terminal cancer, the pain associated with the terminal cancer, spasticity, autism, and yes, still, epilepsy and seizure disorders. This bill maintains the same limit of the THC in CBD oil at 0.5%. It keeps DPS regulation and oversight of the licensing dispensaries in the state. Additionally, House Bill 3703 changes the requirement from 2 neurologists to sign off on a prescription to 1 licensed specialist who is board certified and whose board is recognized by the American Board of Medical Specialists. With that, Mr. President, I move suspension for House Bill 3703.
You know, Senator, every layout you do has so much flair and passion and drama.
Well, you know, this one is deserving of that. So,
as I would expect you to say on every bill.
And as a doctor, it gives us
it will continue on. Chapter 2, story time. It's story time with Senator Campbell. I say that with all affection. We all love you.
Yes.
Senator Menendez, is this with affection or just a good question? You have to rise to her level of passion.
Well, Mr. President,
for what purpose?
Thank you. And if you recall, in 2015, when I got elected in the special election, this was an issue you and I spoke of.
Yes.
One of the very first things when you asked me, what do you want to work on? And I want to thank my colleague, and Senator Campbell for her interest this session as a doctor. It's important to have doctors on this floor involved in this conversation. And Senator Campbell, this is not the bill that you filed this session or the bill that I filed for the third session, is it?
No, there are changes. It's different.
And as a medical doctor, you went to medical school for how many years, Dr. Campbell?
A lot.
Many years, right? Many, many years. So many that you may have already forgotten how many, right?
No, I remember them all.
And when you went, you were taught how to treat people and how you took an oath to do no harm and to help people and to do everything you can to cure someone, correct?
We do.
And so, while I believe so strongly that the state of Texas needs to join the 33 other states that already have a form of medicinal cannabis, and this is not the bill that I would like to see on this floor, I will be supportive of your bill, and I'll tell you why. You were aware of the fact, you brought up a disease, and I don't think you brought it up because you know that my wife has been suffering for many years, but the reality is that there are many people out there with Lou Gehrig's, with Parkinson's, with MS, with cancer, with so many things, that it has been proven. As a matter of fact, CNN just came out with a study that cannabis can help people get over their opioid addictions. So we know, you and I both know, that medically, cannabis as a medical treatment can help everyday Texans. not just those with one tiny form of epilepsy, which I am glad they have it, but just like Blake. You remember Blake, who visited us not too long ago?
Yes, who had a seizure outside the doors of the gallery.
A seizure, and he's suffering from traumatic brain injury through no fault of his own. Is that not true?
Correct. He has TBI.
He has traumatic brain injury because of damage and assault to him. And his parents know that cannabis will help, correct?
Yes, and we have that seizure disorder in this bill.
I just want to say that I understand the pressures that we have to work under, and that many times we can't let perfect get in the way of good. I have many, many amendments that I could have proposed. I've chosen not to.
Thank you.
I would like to see a different bill. Today is not that day. And I want to say thank you for bringing something forward that can get the support of everyone, hopefully as many as we can, to get this bill passed, get to the governor's desk, and get signed so that people who have all of the new additions that you've added, conditions, they can also get treatment. I think that, would you agree that do you believe that everyday Texans, because I have seen the polls, believe that if we were to pass an expansion of the Compassionate Use Act where we let medical doctors treat patients with cannabis-based products like they do with other medicines, would you agree that we would see a benefit, that 2 years from now we would be back here and people would be thanking us?
Well, that's a good question. You know, as a physician, I'm used to practicing in the arena of truth and science. And while I wish there was a lot of measurable science, good, controlled, double-blind studies, like is required for other medications, we don't have that in this.
But you know
so
why?
we are going out on a limb with anecdotal and white papers. And narrowly crafting this gives us a walk with some assurance, not a race into something that may have a lot of unintended consequences.
You're familiar with those drugs that are called, when they suppress the immune system, immunosuppressants,
yes. Immunosuppressants.
Right. Many times that's what they prescribe for people who suffer from MS, correct?
Yes.
So you're familiar with a company out of Israel called Teva, and they have a drug called Copaxone. You familiar with that drug? It's a subcutaneous auto-inject. It's an injectable.
Okay.
Much of the research, that double-blind scientific research you're talking about, would you know that it has been done in Israel, Germany, Spain,
right.
Europe? That the only reason it hasn't been done in the U.S. is because, unfortunately, the federal government still has cannabis listed as a Schedule I drug.
Right.
That's the only reason.
Well, good is that, one, there's such an interest across America that I do believe research companies, pharmaceutical companies, will look at R&D for medical cannabis. And I do know that there's research in Israel, and it's primarily focused around the neurodegenerative diseases, again, like multiple sclerosis with that. So what I do hope between now and future legislators that we will see, as legislators, be able to see good quality research, and then we can base policy on research.
So does your bill address research?
It did, but I took that portion out so that companies that do want to engage in R&D will invest their own dollars for a proprietary finding should they get one. And I believe that there's enough interest and enough anecdotal literature and white papers that somebody will pick up the R&D banner and go forward with the research. But I do not feel the state needs to pick up and support dollars for research in this at this time, because I do believe there will be a pharmaceutical company that picks up and decides to run with research and development of medical cannabis.
You know, the only thing that I think we could, I understand the constraints that you're under on trying to get this bill passed at this late a time of the session. But I think we should also be sending a resolution to the federal government asking them to remove cannabis from a Schedule I drug so that we can get the FDA involved. Because many times I've heard many medical doctors say, well, if the FDA were involved, we wouldn't have to be going through this. Was that not correct?
I'm not going to speak for the FDA. I know many times they do seem to be barriers for drugs that work in other countries. But at this point and today, I want your support on this bill. I know I have it. We can talk about research more another day. It is a component I did not include in this bill.
I appreciate what you have. I want people to know why I'm not going to be presenting amendments, because there are many, many people that have been asking me to present amendments, asking me to replace this bill with my bill.
Yes.
I'm not going to do that, not because I don't think that I think we can do better, but because I think we must extend the compassionate use of cannabis products to more people. And so I want to thank you for joining us in this fight as a medical doctor, and you've said that many, many times on this floor. But never do I believe is as appropriate as it is today. And I want to thank you for what you're doing today.
Thank you very much, Senator Menendez. And thank
Mr. President, was that passionate enough for you?
You know, I was actually going to say, Senator Menendez, very passionate, very sincere, and I heard you in 2015.
From the heart.
From the heart. From experience.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator Menendez. Senator Lucio, for what purpose?
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Senator Campbell, yield for a couple of questions.
Do you yield?
Yes, sir.
Senator Campbell, I too join with my colleagues to thank you for this legislation. I do have some questions, and you know, I proudly serve with you, and you're the chair of the committee that deals with Veterans Affairs, right?
Yes,
and my question is, why aren't veterans who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, included in this bill?
Thank you, Senator Lucio. I think all of us feel the need, and we are aware of what our veterans, many veterans, go through as they return home from battle. There are a number that have PTSD. Not just limited to our veterans, but there's just a lot of people that also have PTSD. And right now, as I was talking with Senator Menendez, we just don't have the data good scientific data that supports for PTSD that we can put in this bill at this time. I mean, for our veterans, our first responders, thank you for speaking out. We heard you. But most importantly, we thank you for your service. And I think you agree with me that, Senator Lucio.
Absolutely.
And I hope that we can get definitive research necessary to be able to include PTSD, TBI, and those other illnesses that are very difficult to measure, even as a physician trying to come up with a concrete diagnosis. It's difficult. So with that, I hope we do develop, there will be research done, that development of a drug that will serve this purpose.
I appreciate your remark, your answer. My concern and your concern and everybody's concern is the number of suicides that happen, you know, each week, each month, each year, and they've been going upwards. You know, especially with veterans. Are all the conditions covered in this bill up to the standard, or are they just symptoms treated like with PTSD?
I'm sorry. You're talking about the list of diagnoses that we've expanded in this bill?
Right.
And your question, sir, was what?
Are all the conditions covered in this bill up to the standard that you use, or are they just their symptoms treated? The symptoms treated like PTSD.
The only one that symptoms are treated would be pain with terminal cancer. dealt with by the oncologist, the specialist that is dealing with the patient. They know at what point the pain with terminal cancer could be used, this drug could be used to alleviate that. But there is more, and again, no double-blind controlled studies, but there is more data, some of it, as Senator Menendez and I discussed, coming out of Israel, showing for the neurodegenerative diseases. So there is more anecdotal, more substantial, and I have to quantify that because, again, it's not our normal controlled trials for these diagnoses, just not for PTSD.
Yes, ma'am.
And there are others that I would have, liked to have seen, but once we get data, that becomes a different story.
A follow-up question would be, are you aware that in states where PTSD-afflicted veterans are eligible to be treated with cannabinoids for opioid addiction and high risk of suicide, veterans reported over 75% reduction in all three areas of PTSD symptoms while using cannabis? Don't you think veterans deserve life-saving relief that could be provided to them in this bill? And I'm supportive of your bill, and I'm going to vote for your bill.
Yes, sir.
I guess want to make a point that we need to be as inclusive as possible, especially with a group of men and women who have given it their all and who might be those that we need to address with this legislation.
Yeah, and let me just speak to that. I don't have the cited anecdotal or literature, but a study was done, a post-mortem, so a retrospective study done looking at autopsies and drug levels, what drugs were in the blood of veterans that committed suicide. And 70% had THC. So that just seems a little conflicting if, on the one hand, we're wanting medical cannabis for PTSD, yet, and again, I don't have the notes in front of me, but to have a retrospective study, just collection of data that shows 70% of those veterans that committed suicide had THC in their blood. So until that gets worked out, that's another thing that gives us some hesitancy putting that in there. But, I'm excited to see future research to come forward because there is nothing that I wouldn't do helping for good founded research to help our veterans. And I think everybody in this room would do the same thing. So it's not to not help our first responders and not help our veterans. It's as we move forward, we must move on the stairs of research, the steps of research, and not just go haphazardly and have unintended consequences. So with that, I do thank you for your support of this bill.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate your compassion. I have just quickly as I can, a couple of other short questions.
I would like to move
I agree
forward
with Governor Patrick in terms of compassion and that you show compassion on this particular issue. But in your layout in the committee, you said that those who benefit from this medicine are our, quote, and I quote you, our friends, our family, our neighbors. They are members of our churches and communities.
Yes.
All the groups we should be fighting for, shouldn't we as senators be fighting for those who fought for us and be included in this bill? And I think you already have eloquently stated why
Senator
they're not
Lucio.
in here, and I appreciate that. Lastly, I want to just say that I hope you're aware, and I think you're aware maybe that the compassionate use of cannabinoids to treat PTSD is included in the party platform for both the Republican Party of Texas and the Texas Democratic Party.
Senator Lucio, thank you for your comments. I'll close our discussion by saying this is not a party thing.
No, I know.
This isn't a Republican or a Democrat thing. This is about physicians. This is about patients. This is about the best data that we have right now to go forward without creating unintended consequences. So with that, I appreciate your comments, sir.
Well, I appreciate having an opportunity to discuss, the use of this medicine in the future for veterans. Thank you very much for your work.
Thank you so much, Senator Lucio, for your compassion.
Senator Hinojosa, for what purpose?
Will Senator Campbell yield for a few questions?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Senator Campbell, I just want to thank you for taking the lead on House Bill 3703. Your bill is going to help a lot of people, including people that I know have seizures. And I understand Senator Lucio's issue with veterans and PTSD. Being a Vietnam veteran, I know it, I understand it, been there, know how it works. But we need to take one step at a time, and we're getting there. And we have about 20 veterans commit suicide every day.
Yes.
20 veterans. And the statistics that you provided, that about 70% of veterans who commit suicide end up having cannabis, THC in their bodies. What happens, and this is real life, you have a lot of veterans that do get cannabis illegally, if you will, here in Texas. It's all over the place. And many go to Colorado, other states where it's legal. So, I mean, it is a complicated issue. You're quite right. We probably don't have enough data yet to make that step. And maybe some point in the future we will. But I think the bill that you have today on the Senate floor is very beneficial to many, many people. And I just want to thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Senator Hinojosa. You're just spot on. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for your service as a Marine.
Senator Birdwell, for what purpose?
Questions of the author?
Do you yield?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Campbell. I want to have a very deliberate conversation with you about this issue, potential direction that we're taking the state of Texas. I want to ask some questions of you and then also provide some comments based upon what I've already heard and experiences. Is there any future objective to have medical practitioners who practice the specialties outside of those listed in your bill? Epilepsy, seizure disorders, multiple sclerosis, the others, to have prescribing authority at some future?
No. I think it's very important that we have a specialist of the diseases that are listed
Okay.
to have that interaction with the patient. So no family practice, no other.
Okay. Because
it's limited.
I'm happy with that because I don't want to make my medical experience the center of gravity of our conversation, but it is an animator
Yes.
of what I want to discuss.
Yes.
Because there's a few specialties I've not seen. One of the reasons I like the way and the manner in which you and Representative Click have written this bill is that it's a very tight shot group.
Yes, sir.
But my concern is, and while I share Senator Menendez's desire for what you've expressed here in expanding who may receive such compassionate care, I come at this with a highly guarded sense of danger of the direction that this might take us to with recreational use. So my second question is, do you intend for family practice or nurse practitioners working under doctors with these areas of specialty to have prescribing authority?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
And that'll be in the record.
Because what you and I have seen in scope of practice bills are always extremely difficult. But in this case, because of the nature of the precedent that we are moving toward, or that we are setting, and the potential direction that this state might take with a future legislature. I don't want to see this bill turn into a scope of practice battle between doctors in these specialties and nurse practitioners under those specialties, or in areas of the state as large as we are that may not have these specialties in our more rural counties, to see family practice doctors or some other specialty authorized to do something outside of this scope of practice
Defined.
simply because of the geographic nature of where those practitioners are in the state of Texas. So it is not your intention to have nurse practitioners, physician's assistants that work under doctors in these licenses to have prescribing authorities, nor is it your intention that doctors outside of these specialties in parts of the state that don't have a density of these specialties to at some point be given prescribing authority.
That is correct. So it's not just an intent. We know intent can be one thing, but words on paper are something else. And this bill clearly defines it as a physician, doctor, board certified in the specialist, and that specialist approved by the American Board of Medical Specialties.
Okay.
This does not apply to anyone practicing outside the medical specialties, nor anyone that works for them or under them or that they supervise.
Okay. The primary purpose of the CBD oil, as you have, I shouldn't say primary purpose, but the neurodegenerative diseases, but you also have terminal cancer listed.
Yes.
And it is the one diagnosis that is not neurodegenerative. You know, epilepsy, seizures, MS, spasticity, ALS, autism, and other incurable neurodegenerative all share neurology as their common theme. Cancers are a separate area of diagnosis, correct?
Well, let me just qualify that. Cancer hits every specialty, if you will.
Correct.
Brain cancer, spinal cancer, neuroblastomas. So there is a portion of cancer that is terminal neurodegenerative. But for the purpose of this, I am speaking in general about terminal cancer.
Okay. So my concern is, are there terminal cancers? Because you have, when we spoke about this earlier, it's terminal cancers primarily because of the pain generated by terminal cancers. Not the fact that it's cancer in general, but that it is terminal, thus causing certain amounts of pain because of its terminal nature of cancer.
Right, that's a fair statement. We're dealing with the pain.
Okay.
Also, this can help nausea, that as you can have bowel obstruction and some other problems with where the cancer is, it can also help nausea. But again, that is left between the specialist and the patient.
Okay. Are there cancers that, though terminal, are either less painful or not painful in your specialty? And as a medically trained doctor, I submit to your knowledge and authority here. What I'm very trying to hone in on,
yes,
is that it's pain related to terminal cancers.
Yes.
And I don't want this, no pun intended meant whatsoever, but I don't want this bill to metastasize into a pain management bill.
right.
Where now it's not related to cancer, it's now just simply pain.
And that is a good question. And for some that are concerned about whether this is a slippery slope and where
I'm
are we...
more concerned it's a cliff, Senator, but that's why we're having a very
candid
sound conversation.
Yes. It's terminal cancer, pain associated with terminal cancer. And I think I may have lost.
But the
your question.
oncologist will be the one that, because look,
Yes,
I've had a pain management doctor walk into my room the day after I came out of ICU.
Yes.
I don't want this to turn into, now we're going to add pain management specialist and it's Katie bar the door.
Well, and so to your point, initially I thought any doctor-patient relationship was good enough. But I put belts and suspenders and defined it to just those specialists that deal with those.
Right. Because here's
those type of diagnoses, those type of patients.
Here's the reason I asked the specificity of the question, and I'll revert to my personal medical experience.
Yeah.
While my experience was not neurological, actually there was a part of it that was because of the vasculopathy I had, doctor. But
yes, sir.
There was a part of it that I had to be referred to a neurologist for some of the and an OTO doc for some of the inner ear damage as a result of some of the
I can only imagine
the aminoglycosides. But the point I'm getting at is all the medical professionals that I dealt with and I continue to deal with, none have ever said I needed CBD. Now, granted, the bulk of the rigor of my experience was 2001 to 2005. While that's very valid experience, its shelf life as it relates to advances in medical technology is very different. So I'm open to this consideration that you've put in here, again, because I think you've crafted the bill very tightly. I'm just very concerned that we're going to rush. Again, with all respect to Senator Menendez, I wouldn't be comfortable going any further than this because of what I'm seeing in Colorado, Washington, and Oregon, and what's happening in those states. I am highly guarded, and that's why I want to have this conversation with you.
And Senator Birdwell, that's why we've put restraints on this bill, kept it narrowly crafted. So I appreciate that. I share your concerns for any movement toward this going over the cliff toward legalizing marijuana. I am not for legalizing marijuana.
Okay.
I don't think that's a surprise to anyone.
Is there the reason I asked the question about types of cancer is, are there cancers that are terminal that don't require CBD as a pain?
Yes.
Do you know if there are?
There's likely to be some out there. There are so many cancers, but even a squamous cell which is a skin cancer, gone wild, can have pain. Because eventually, as cancer metastasizes, it starts affecting nerve endings, and that's where you start getting your pain. So whether it's headaches from a glioblastoma or belly pain because of cancer. So I cannot say that there are some cancers that do not have pain. But what I can say is that the decision between a doctor and a patient, the oncologist, the specialist, and somebody who's got terminal cancer, it's up to them. And at some point, I've got to leave it to the doctor's discretion.
Right.
There is, I hope, nothing in this bill that is the nose of the camel under the tent for legalizing marijuana.
Is there any contemplation of CBD oil use for cancer that is non-terminal?
No.
Okay. Is there any contemplation in the bill that you would intend at some future date that you mentioned you took research out?
Yes.
Exactly what the research was, I don't know, but some sort of data analysis. Is there any contemplation of changing the percentage from low THC at 0.5 to something that would be measured as moderate or high THC?
I can tell you I did start with that. I started with less than 1%. There's more information for 0.5, but what we've been able to see is the last 4 years, when it was first passed in 15, we haven't seen any problems or movement toward legalizing marijuana anymore by having that. So I think 0.5 is safe. Now, the bill does not imply that we're going any higher. Is it my intention? My intention is to watch for research, see what it shows. It's not my intention to go further, higher. That's probably not a good term. It's not my intention to increase the percentage of THC without some substantial data, good quality.
Okay. You mentioned data.
And research.
And
it's not just data, but it's research.
But that takes me to my next question. That does the Texas Medical Board, or is there a private entity out there that does it? Because look, what makes this session different for me. In previous sessions, I've had individuals come in, talk to my staff, that I knew that their ultimate end state, based upon Facebook pages, other things, their ultimate end state was full recreational legalization.
Yes.
But they were talking to me about medical use of marijuana.
Yes.
So that caused me suspect in their motivations for why they were, because you win your battles in echelon, and to get to full recreational, are we going down that road as we've talked? But what made this session different for me was that I had some parents, the parents of Blake, others,
disorder,
people that aren't necessarily, that have the same cautions that I do, but said there may be some potential here. So it told me there's a different motivation. I was doing my best to, as the Lord says, be discerning. And so that caused me a slightly different perspective in how I looked at what might be some potential here. But I want to make sure that it's research that is unbiased, that it's research that, because look, I have yet to have competent medical authority come in and tell me this is the right thing to do. You're the first doctor to tell me this is the right thing to do. I've had a bunch of people interested in something else tell me it's the right thing to do, but you're the first doctor to tell me that. And I've seen a lot of doctors in my last 18 years, Doc. But so does the medical board have some mechanism to give us unbiased analysis of that research, or is there some other entity that the state has to give us a authenticated view of that research as opposed to a biased or partisan's not the right word, but an agenda-driven research result?
That's a good question. I will say that I don't believe the Texas Medical Board has that even on their radar. Their board is more complaint-driven, trying to protect the public, general welfare, and make sure doctors are
They were up for
doing what they're
sunset this
supposed to do.
go-around. This wasn't any part of that. So
No. So to answer your question specifically about the Texas Medical Board, no. Now, I can tell you that this has DPS oversight, from the dispensaries to physicians, the registry. Now, again, since it was passed in 15, there doesn't seem to have been a problem. We will now look what happens over the next 2 years. And sometimes you say you can't take the genie out of the bottle, but we most certainly can tighten up the neck of that if we find that there's misuse, mishandling, misprescribing by physicians. We've tried to tie it narrowly. Physicians really walk, whenever you're talking about specialists, they're trying to walk the line. So
well,
I'd say DPS is probably the closest thing we have. Do we have a specific agency or group that's going to measure the data, monitor it, other than DPS? I don't think so.
Because what I don't want to see happen is either CBD be the bridge to full recreational usage.
Yes.
I also don't want to see it in its current format become the next opioid crisis.
Yes.
But what are the mechanisms in place to ensure that? And it sounds like we haven't contemplated that yet here.
Well, I think that we've limited it. It's not as easy to get. There's only 3 dispensaries that do this, sell this. It's expensive. But saying all that aside, we can do something today to help families, even though we don't have, with these diagnoses, even though we don't have great data. And as I said at the onset, that's the arena I'm used to practicing in. We can't control what the next legislative body will do, what even the makeup of the chamber would look like. So I can't speak to that. I can only speak to what this bill directs. And, if I need to come back and do something more, because we have seen some missteps, I'll be the first to lead on that.
I would certainly appreciate that.
You're welcome, sir.
I have another question, Madam Senator, and then there's a couple of points I want to make. Is there a possibility, you mentioned the ABM specialties or the Bureau of Osteopathic Specialties, is there a possibility that those two organizations could make a change to their specializations and what they sanction that would inherently expand prescribing authority based upon your legislation here, that would expand medical professionals based upon their change in certifications, that would expand the medical professionals that you did not contemplate in this legislation?
No.
Okay, so
Because
two private boards will not be able to make a decision that has the inverse effect in the state of Texas law that you have not contemplated here.
Correct. You can become a specialist in THC, cannabis, treatment of cannabis, whatever. That is not a specialty. That is, you may have, if a board opens it up for a specialty like that, that does not meet the diagnosis requirements for the specialist. So it's not going to make them a cancer doctor.
I just want to make sure that in the way you've structured the bill, decisions by a non-legislative body, but a medical board, will inherently expand as you've got it written in state law.
A board can open up specialties however they want, whatever criteria they base it on. But the bill says you've got to be a specialist in that disease.
Okay.
So can't speak to what they would do. And let me tell you, Senator Birdwell, you're bringing up great questions. And it is definitely something that I think I need to come back with next session. It's late in the session. And maybe look at what we've talked about and bring in some legislation just to provide some security, some assurity of the bill.
I also want to mention I want to tell you something in your capacity, not just as a doctor, but as chair of the Committee on Veterans Affairs and Border Security. There are challenges that you're seeing, and I mean no disrespect to our fellow sovereign states of Colorado, Oregon, Washington, and others. But you're already seeing a black market for high THC in Colorado. The nature of the destruction of lives and opportunity from the misuse of recreational marijuana. I've got employers in my district that tell me about their concerns of, particularly with younger employees, but finding folks that can pass a drug test. I don't want the state of Texas to move to a future state endorsement of such challenges. And that's why I'm so concerned with this bill, not as it is, but the step that it must be to get to some future state. Thus my concern with what Senator Menendez has said. I don't think he wants full recreational use, but I'm highly cautious at the direction in the state, that the steps that we are taking here. What wounds my heart most, though, Senator, in your capacity as Chair of Veterans Affairs, is that there are those out there that would leverage in the name of compassion. Veterans who wear the scars or the missing limbs that no one wants to say no to.
Yes, sir.
That would leverage that compassion and that desire not to say no to veterans. That will use that leverage, and as my discernment informs me, to the full legalization of recreational marijuana. Members, I want you to understand what I'm about to tell you. we will do a major disservice to our state. And I would admonish this body to not let my scars or those of other veterans cause us to endorse such a policy. One of my most famous constituents, Chris Kyle, is deceased because of a multi-year marijuana user who claimed in his murder trial to have PTSD. Unfortunately, there were 12 Texans in that jury box from Stephenville that didn't buy that. And from the conversation you had with Senator Lucio about what we found in veterans who have committed suicide for THC, I want to make sure that we don't put us down that road. Senator, I think you have crafted the bill correctly. You and Representative Click, I should say, have crafted the bill correctly. I will support it. But I will not allow it to become the road to perdition for Texas that has manifested itself in Colorado and other states. Thank you for your work, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator Birdwell. I appreciate the comments, the questions, and I agree and will support that.
Mr. President, I'd like to move that my comments between Senator Campbell and myself be reduced to writing, placed in the journal.
Thank you, Senator. Any objection? Hearing none. The motion is adopted. Members,
Mr.
I would like,
President,
thank you. I would like to remind you, members, we have hundreds of bills today.
Yes.
And suspension is not a debatable motion. That's for third reading. And as we go through in the concern and care of everyone's bills on the floor, if I think we are going on and on too long on a bill, I will just remind you of that. You have a right to speak as long as you wish, but it would be nice to move. Senator Menendez, what purpose?
Mr. President, in order for us to accomplish what you've said, and then I think out of respect for everyone's legislation that they're trying to pass, regardless of what's happening to our legislation on the other side, I believe, and I will ask if it's possible, that we can stay on, because in the past you've been very tight in terms of staying on subject on this bill. In that last exchange, I heard a lot of what-ifs about other legislation and where we could end up. This bill is about very tightly, barely expanding the Medical Compassionate Use Act. And it's nowhere near where I think it should be. But out of respect, I have not presented amendments, and I'm going to respect the process and the author. And I just ask the same of my colleagues.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate your comments. I also feel that when people are very, very passionate about something, give them as much lead. I just want to remind everybody, this is the last day to pass a bill. I would not normally say this. This is the last day. Senator Paxton, for what purpose?
To ask a question of the author.
Do you yield, Senator Campbell?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, Senator Campbell. And the interchange I just witnessed, I think, between you and Senator Birdwell, I think expresses many of my personal feelings and concerns about this issue in general. And I just wanted to ask, just based on that conversation, is it correct that you acknowledge that there are some real concerns in what Senator Birdwell brought up?
Yeah, I think he made great marks, and my bill addresses that.
Thank you. And also, is it correct that your intention is nowhere in the direction of legalizing recreational use of marijuana?
And I think I made that clear, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Senator Paxton.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Betancourt?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just wanted to say what a fabulous job you've done on this bill, and I'm honored to be a co-author.
Thank you
and
very
I
much.
and I encourage everybody else to just be a co-author and let our votes take this bill out to law.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Campbell moves to suspend the regular order of business. Any objection? Hearing none, rules are suspended. Chair lays on second reading committee substitute for House Bill 3703. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute, House Bill 3703, relating to prescription of low THC cannabis for medical use by certain qualified physicians.
Senator Campbell, you're recognized on passage to third reading.
I move passage to third reading.
Any objection? Hearing none, bill passes to third reading. You're now recognized to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
I move to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Buckingham.
31 ayes, no nays, rules suspended. Chair lays on third reading and final passage. Committee substitute for House Bill 3703. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute, House Bill 3703, relating to prescription of low THC cannabis for medical use.
Senator, you're recognized on final passage.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage, and I want to thank Representative Click. I want to thank Senator Menendez, Senator Schwartner, so many that helped me, even Senator Lucio the third in the House. So with that, I move final passage.
Secretary will call the roll.
Sorry. Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell.
31 ayes and no nays. Bill is finally passed. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members, and thank you.